It was a Friday evening in downtown Chicago, the kind where the skyline shimmered with 1,000 gold windows and the sidewalks smelled like wealth. Town cars idled at curbs. Paparazzi lingered like shadows. Inside the grand lobby of the Elmsworth Hotel, the air buzzed with the kind of energy only rich people pretend not to notice. The gala had just begun. Crystal chandeliers rained light onto marble floors. Jazz floated from a grand piano in the lounge. Waiters in white gloves passed around glasses of Dom Perignon and hors d'oeuvres that cost more than most people's groceries. And then the revolving door creaked open and the world paused. He stepped in, heavy boots thudding softly against the marble. He was huge, black, broad-shouldered, heavy-set. His coat was ragged and dusted with lint. A beanie sat low on his forehead, half-shadowing a face that looked like it had seen more winters than birthdays. A man out of place. No Rolex, no tuxedo, no entourage, just presence. Some people stared, others pretended not to. A woman near the bar clutched her purse closer. A middle-aged man whispered to his wife. How'd he get past the front? And yet, the man didn't flinch, didn't look left or right. He stood still, centered, as if gravity respected him more than others. The Elmsworth wasn't just any hotel. It was a sanctuary for CEOs, celebrities, and senators. It was where power stayed when it came to town. And this man, he looked like he didn't even own a suitcase. Behind the concierge desk, Victoria watched with narrowed eyes, her red lipstick perfect, her hair twisted into a bun so tight it looked painful. She had worked here for 7 years, knew every VIP by face, and she knew trouble when she saw it. She stepped forward, her high heels tapping with authority. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone practiced and cold. "This is a private event. Do you need assistance?" The man turned his head slowly. His eyes were dark, but they didn't threaten. They weighed, heavy, observant, calm, like a storm that had already passed, but left the sky gray forever. "I have a reservation," he said. Victoria blinked once, then again. Her brain tried to wrap itself around the words. "A reservation," she repeated, the words sour in her mouth. She looked him up and down. Torn collar, duct-taped, duffel bag, boots that looked like they'd walked through fire and snow. The room felt like it tilted. She chuckled lightly, her voice crisp and dismissive. "Sir, I think you might be lost. This isn't that kind of hotel." The insult hung in the air, but the man didn't react. No anger, no protest, just silence. He reached slowly into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and placed it on the polished mahogany desk. "Reservation confirmation, Daniel King, Presidential Suite, VIP priority." Victoria's fingers hesitated above the keyboard. She didn't believe it. She couldn't. Just then, a soft voice interrupted from the side. "A Miss Victoria." It was Leo, the youngest bellboy on staff, barely 19, nervous, sweet, always watching from the shadows. Victoria sighed, not breaking her gaze. "Yes, Leo." Leo stepped forward, looked at the screen, then at Daniel. "It's real," he said. "The name's in the system, and he's listed under executive partner rate. That means I know what it means." Victoria snapped, but her voice cracked, just slightly. Daniel tilted his head, watching her. He didn't look smug. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that comes from work, the kind that comes from being underestimated too many times. "Would you like me to wait somewhere else?" he asked gently. "If I'm making anyone uncomfortable." Victoria froze. She suddenly felt small. "No," she said, forcing a smile. "Of course not. Right this way." But it was too late. Everyone in the room had heard it. Everyone had seen it. Daniel picked up his duffel and started walking toward the elevators. His boots echoed like judgment across the marble, and the people, they moved. Not because they were asked to, because he moved. Someone whispered, "Who is that guy?" Another replied, "No idea, but that's no ordinary man." And deep in the lounge, an old hotel owner, who hadn't spoken all night, said quietly, "That man's a king. I've seen real kings. You don't need a crown to know." As Daniel reached the elevator, he turned to Leo and smiled, just slightly. "Thank you," he said. Leo nodded awkwardly, trying not to stare. "Welcome to the Elmsworth, Mr. King." The doors closed, and the lobby exhaled, but not Victoria. She stood frozen, staring at the empty elevator. Her heart pounded, her stomach twisted, because deep down, she knew she had just made the worst mistake of her career, and the night hadn't even started. The elevator chimed as it reached the top floor. The doors slid open to reveal a grand hallway, lined with golden sconces and velvet carpeting, the kind of corridor that didn't echo footsteps. It absorbed them. Every inch whispered luxury. Daniel stepped out, his duffel bag swaying gently at his side, and made his way toward the entrance of the Elmsworth Grand Ballroom, the heart of tonight's gala. Inside, chandeliers dripped with crystals. Soft classical music floated in the air, like perfume. Guests were seated at round tables covered in linen so fine, even the candlelight seemed afraid to wrinkle it. Tonight's gala was for a high-profile charity initiative, City of Second Chances, an organization that claimed to fight homelessness and poverty. Ironically, none of the guests looked like they'd ever missed a meal, let alone a mortgage. And then, Daniel King entered. No announcement, no spotlight, just the sound of heavy boots meeting marble, and the silence that followed. The reaction was instant, though unspoken. A fork clinked too loudly against a plate, a wine glass paused mid-sip. A woman in an emerald gown whispered, "Is he part of the staff?" Someone else added, "No, he's got a badge, VIP access." Another voice, "Is this some kind of statement?" Daniel didn't look at any of them. He walked with the stillness of someone who had seen worse than judgment, worse than whispers, and yet, each step he took pressed into the room like a thumbprint on glass, subtle but unforgettable. Victoria was already inside, refilling champagne glasses with a little too much energy. She spotted him instantly, and her stomach flipped. She hadn't told anyone, not yet, but seeing him again, moving through the crowd, calm and impossible to ignore, sent a cold wave through her spine. "He's not supposed to belong here," she muttered under her breath. But that was the problem. He did, not because of clothes, not because of money, because he carried himself like a man who had nothing to prove, and yet proved everything with silence. Across the ballroom, whispers turned to murmurs. One older man adjusted his cufflinks and leaned toward his wife. "You see that man? That's Daniel King." Her eyes widened. "The philanthropist." He nodded slowly. "The one who vanished last year. Said he was taking time away from the suits to see the streets. Rumor is, he's been living as a homeless man for months, just to see the truth." The woman looked stunned. "You're saying he chose to live like that?" "No, I'm saying he understood why it matters." Meanwhile, Daniel stood at the edge of the ballroom, away from the centerpieces and chatter. A waitress offered him a glass of champagne. He shook his head with a soft smile. He wasn't here to toast. He was here to watch, to listen, to weigh. On the stage, the evening speaker, a wealthy tech CEO, was going on about innovation, donation matching, and disrupting the poverty cycle. His words bounced across the room like hollow coins. Daniel tilted his head slightly. A storm lived behind those eyes. Not anger, not pride, memory. Of nights sleeping on bus benches, of people pretending not to see him, of soup kitchens where volunteers smiled with pity, but never asked his name. Victoria hovered near a table at the back, pretending to check the wine levels. Her hands trembled. She saw how guests looked at him now, some curious, others ashamed. She overheard the whispers, the stories about the billionaire, who walked away from boardrooms to sleep in alleyways. She had laughed at him, mocked him, called security. Now he was the most powerful person in the room, and he hadn't said a single word. Suddenly, a voice called from the front, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a very special guest tonight, someone whose life mission reflects the very heart of this gala, Mr. Daniel King." There was no applause at first, just silence, then slowly, hesitant clapping. A few stood, then more, until the entire room rose to its feet, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper, respect, or maybe guilt. Daniel stepped forward, his boots quiet against the velveted floor. He didn't adjust a mic, he didn't fix his collar, he just stood there, still, watching the crowd as they watched him. And then he spoke. The ballroom fell silent. Daniel King stood center stage. No tuxedo, no podium, no performance, just him, in that worn coat, in those old boots, carrying stories in his silence that no diamond cufflink could ever match. The chandelier lights cast a golden glow across his face. His expression was calm, but his eyes, those deep, unblinking eyes, looked like they had seen the world at its worst, and chosen not to become it. He didn't start with a joke. He didn't thank sponsors. He looked straight at the crowd, then at Victoria, who stood frozen at the edge of the room, heart racing, guilt rising like heat in her chest. And then he spoke, low, deep, a voice that didn't command attention, but made people lean in to earn it. "I wasn't always Daniel King, the man you're reading about in the brochures. I wasn't always a CEO, or a donor, or a headline. Before I had money, I had dirt under my nails. Before I had a name in business, I had a number on a prison jumpsuit." A ripple of surprise spread through the room. There was a time when I couldn't afford socks, when I used newspapers as blankets, when the only people who looked me in the eye were other people trying to survive. He paused, letting the silence settle like dust. "I didn't come here tonight to be celebrated. I came here to remember, because for the last 6 months, I've been sleeping under bridges, in shelters, in alleyways." Gasps. One woman dropped her wine glass. It shattered softly on the carpet. Daniel's voice didn't shake. It stayed calm, even as pain swelled beneath the surface. "People didn't see me. They saw the dirt, the weight, the skin. They turned their backs, held their bags tighter, laughed behind cafe windows while I searched trash cans for something warm." He scanned the room. His eyes paused on a man in a $6,000 suit, then on a woman in a gown so tight she hadn't moved all evening. "But you know what hurt the most?" He paused. "It wasn't the hunger, or the cold. It was being looked at, like I was less, like I had no name." His gaze landed, finally, on Victoria. She froze. "Earlier tonight, I walked into this hotel, a guest, with a reservation, but I was asked if I was lost, told I didn't belong." The ballroom held its breath. Not because I was rude, not because I caused trouble, but because of how I looked, because I didn't match the carpet. Some people shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Others looked down at their glasses, their reflection staring back in silence. I've lived both sides. I've worn the suit and the torn jacket. I've tasted champagne and city rain. And let me tell you this, you don't know someone's worth by looking at them. You don't measure humanity in clothing brands or credit limits. The richest man I ever met shared his last slice of bread with me in a shelter, and the poorest man I ever met had 5 houses and no soul. The crowd was still. Even the jazz band had stopped playing, as if the instruments themselves were listening. The problem isn't wealth. The problem is forgetting what it means to see people. He turned slightly, his voice gentler now. "If this gala, this charity, means anything, then let it begin tonight. Not with your donations, but with your hearts.
Because respect costs nothing, and kindness, he smiled faintly, kindness can change everything. He stepped back, no mic drop, no dramatic exit. He simply nodded, as if to say, that's all I needed to say, then walked down the steps, and the room erupted. But it wasn't the applause you hear after a concert. It was soft at first, almost reverent, a standing ovation, not for his fame, but for his truth. People clapped with their hands, and cried with their eyes. Some even walked over to hug him. Others whispered apologies into their champagne. Victoria couldn't move. Her throat felt like it was closing. She had been part of the problem. Now she didn't know if she deserved to be part of the solution. Daniel walked past her, and paused. She looked up, barely breathing. "Mr. King," she whispered. He turned, his face gentle. "I'm sorry," she said, tears welling. He looked at her, not with anger, but with something that hurt even more, disappointment. And then he said, softly, "Be better," and walked on. The ballroom was quieter now. The applause had faded. The wine glasses sat untouched. The laughter, the business card exchanges, the polite clinking of forks, all gone. Daniel's words had left the room, like the wind after a storm, still, but forever changed. Some guests had tears in their eyes. Others stood silently, lost in thought. A few had left early, maybe embarrassed, maybe ashamed, but no one left the same. In the far corner, Victoria stood frozen near the champagne bar. The tray in her hand trembled slightly. Her throat was dry. Her feet felt like stone. "Be better," that's all he'd said. Not "you're fired," not "how dare you," just "be better." It was heavier than any insult, because it held both judgment and hope. Later, that night, the meeting, the restaurant had emptied. The soft jazz had stopped. The chandeliers were dimmed. In the staff lounge, every employee was gathered in a circle, some still in uniform. Others had taken off their vests and aprons, but none could take off the weight of what had happened that night. Daniel stood at the center, still in that same coat, still towering, but now, somehow, gentler. The hotel manager, Mr. Ellis, stood beside him, nervous, respectful, silent. Daniel looked around the room. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone brought stillness. What happened tonight wasn't about a coat or a mistake at the front desk. It was about something deeper. He looked directly at Victoria. She swallowed hard, eyes red, but didn't look away. We forget sometimes that people aren't always what they seem, that behind every face is a story. Behind every worn jacket, maybe a heart that survived hell. You don't have to know someone's past to treat them with dignity. You just have to remember, they're human. A silence settled. Then Daniel did something unexpected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slip of paper. "A check. This is a donation to the Staff Education Fund," he said. "I want everyone here to have the chance to grow, not just in job titles, but in mindset. Let this hotel become known, not for its chandeliers, but its compassion." Eyes widened, mouths opened, but no one spoke. Then Daniel turned to Victoria. Her chest rose and fell in short, panicked breaths. She stepped forward, tears welled up again. "I judged you," she said, voice shaking, "not because you did anything wrong, but because I assumed, because I let your clothes speak louder than your soul, and I'm sorry." Daniel didn't interrupt, didn't nod, didn't forgive, not yet. He just listened, and when she was done, he said something soft, something honest. "Change doesn't start with an apology. It starts with what you do next." Then he walked toward the door, and paused. "I'll be back, maybe not next week, maybe not next year, but one day, and when I do, I hope I see a place that treats the janitor like the general manager, because they both matter." The doorman held the glass door open. Daniel stepped out into the night. No cameras, no limo, no one following him, just the city lights dancing on the sidewalk, and the cool wind brushing against his face. He pulled his beanie tighter, took a breath, and walked, not away from the hotel, but toward something bigger, toward a world he hadn't given up on yet, toward people still learning how to see each other, really see. Inside the hotel, Victoria watched from the window, and for the first time in her career, she didn't feel like she was looking down on someone. She was looking up, not because of status, but because she had just witnessed something rare. Grace.